The extreme heat is similar to the extreme cold. As far as the season is concerned, the heat has made me want to retreat into my shell like a turtle. But right now it's pretty nice out. It's 7 in the morning. I've had 1.5 small cups of coffee. I took Chief on a walk and I fed the chickens. It's the same every morning. Now he's waiting for me to feed him, and I will, but I usually take an hour of nothingness for myself. I think I've had that hour, and now I'll make a video. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to share something interesting. I love you all. Thank you for being here. God bless and welcome. Okay, good morning, or evening, or whatever. It's always now. Now is all we have. We can forget the future for now. The future and past are unknown. We think we know, but do we really? I've opened up a bunch of tabs, and I have a little list of random things next to me, and I'll share them in no order of importance. I had all these things I wanted to share, and then I found another little note, and for some reason it interested me more than any of the other topics. It's very obnoxious to see the leaders of all nations being stupid. It's already challenging enough to try to make sense of our past without nations fighting with each other and continuing to eradicate their cities and past, and people, unfortunately. I think this is old enough to share. I am more of a libertarian, and regardless of how we got to where we are today, I believe in natural law. And when it comes to governing, I believe in a more independent approach. When it comes to governing a nation, I lean with Lao Tzu. One should rule or govern the way one fries a small fish. And frying a small fish would certainly imply minding your own business. Every nation is broken to some extent, especially when we understand our history with more clarity. And these nations should just shut up when it comes to what other nations should do. And sometimes foreign aid seems like a nice gesture, but not if your own nation is filled with homeless, debt, and problems that should be solved before you start giving the people's money to other nations, or before you start letting newcomers in. Again, you should take care of what you have. Before you start construction on a road, you should fix the existing ones. And here I'm starting out with Beirut. Why Beirut was once called the Paris of the Middle East. All of these nations that are going through turmoil show evidence of once having a very orderly, peaceful, prosperous community inhabiting its streets. And the more man intervenes, the more turmoil. It's that clear. We're told that these cities looked so beautiful because of colonialism, be it the French or the British. But when these cities look like every other city in the realm, we have to ask ourselves about the true origins. In my last video, I shared accounts of Mormons arriving in the 1850s, and in their official records, talking about empty cities right when they get here. And they discuss filling these cities up, populating this state of Utah with their own people. Then I showed a picture of an old inhabitant of Utah, a Native American from the Timpanogos tribe, and he and his wife looked Indian. She had the dot on her head, and he was dressed really well. Had really fine shoes, pants, and button-up shirt. Looked like it was made of silk. And anyway, I talked about the potential Indian from India history, and a lot of people chimed in and said, "You've got it all wrong. The black man was the original occupant of North America." And I have made videos on that in the past. I have a video titled World War Zero, which I never heard about in my studies in school. And in that video, we discovered that yes, indeed, the black man has a history in North America, long before talk of slavery and bringing anyone over from Africa. We can see many depictions and photos of what we are told are Native Americans, and they are clearly a black people. We can go further south and see giant heads of statues from a people that we call the Olmec, also black man in America. And essentially what we see is all people. Wow. All people. I grew up in Arizona. I got my first apartment in Flagstaff and was friends with a lot of Hopi. I'd already studied Buddhism, was very familiar with the Tibetans, and couldn't help but notice that the Hopi absolutely resembled the Tibetans. And then we've also discussed the Vikings. The truth is there are records, even in our history, that don't seem like they're pushed as heavily as the Christopher Columbus story, that discuss the Vikings actually first discovering America. Now, when we look at the word Vikings, we see the word kings, and we see VI before kings. And are the Vikings being portrayed as a primitive people in our history, the same way all past civilizations are portrayed, even though their architecture and wisdom carried on through generations seems very advanced? We've discussed Mount Rushmore and how the native people used to call it the Six Grandfathers. This thing is built in the middle of nowhere by a man and his son at a sacred site called the Six Grandfathers. And here we must consider who the grandfathers are. We must consider the Vikings, or the Six Kings, or was it 7 kings? 7 nations, 7 continents, all under the same umbrella, all operating as a peaceful realm, building the same architectural style in every corner of the world. So let's look at the things I was actually going to share today. Here I wanted to talk about Cedar City. Cedar City will have been one of those towns that they found. Totally old brick city in the middle of nowhere. And I was reading this a couple days ago, and what interested me is how there are actually no cedars in Cedar City. They didn't even realize that the trees that are abundant, I have them too in my area, are not actually cedars but junipers. And to this day I order wood from my woodsman, and he asks me if I want pine or cedar, and the cedar is actually juniper. Really good burn, really dense, a hardwood. And if there were any cedars in this town, I think they may have been giant trees, giant cedar trees that were perhaps destroyed in a past reset. Now I want to look at Coney Island. Okay, Coney Island. Now, Coney Island has kind of a World's Fair vibe going on. An amusement, we're told. And I have no doubt they had a party here before demolishing most of it. But what is this really? I mean, it seems awesome. It seems like the best city ever. All of these amusement hubs. I mean, the kind of place you'd want to live and walk around. And yet these were just amusement parks, we're told. Fairs. And they always have a waterway in the center. Fountains, water. Always a big tower in the center. Towers all around. And what may have this really have been? Here's another look. Coney Island. We see all these roller coasters. 1, 2, 3. Just in this little picture here. And my thoughts were that this is all industrial. This has nothing to do with amusements. These are often by the water. Super industrial looking, brick buildings everywhere, smokestacks, and I think these were centers of commerce, industrial warehouses, shipping, transportation hubs. And there would be no need for such extravagant centers in this early time period, in this horse and wagon pre-industrial time period. Small populations and no power. Oftentimes, these scenes predate power. We see something similar at the Ferry Building in San Francisco, and this is over-the-top development for this time period. This is complete. Buildings are built right up to the edge of the water. Artificial coastlines everywhere. The peak of a civilization. Everything is done, but now in ruins, and all of this would be repurposed, demolished, and forgotten. So this is the picture I was talking about. This is the one that just slapped me in the face and made me realize these were not amusement parks. Now let's zoom in a little bit and you can see what I'm talking about. One of these little sections is Coney Island. One of them. And what you can see is this is much more than an amusement park. These are fully developed towns with industry. This is all industry and not amusement, in my opinion. Ferris wheel, tower, train going around it, feeding into this super building. And then let's move next door here. Roller coaster, roller coaster, roller coaster, giant building. Let's move over. Roller coaster, roller coaster, roller coaster, giant tower, Ferris wheel, another giant tower, octagon, lake, ramp going up to tower in the ocean, piers with buildings on them. And let's go behind it. Roller coaster, towers, buildings, train tracks leading out to nothingness and disrepair. We move over, giant building, towers, giant tower, roller coaster around it, roller coaster up here. And let's look at the title again, Bird's Eye View, Coney Island. And we see somebody has numbered the buildings. Number 8, number 5, and I made a great video a while back. I think it was called Bird's Eye Views of a bunch of cities all throughout the realm and how they're all complete. And it looks like these maps, as I shared in that video, were like real estate brochures selling off these buildings and this land to those that would take control of all of this. So here we can see the buildings, the Pavilion, Ocean Parkway, over on this side, Luna Park, Dreamland, Steeplechase Park, Brighton Beach, Racetrack. So there we go. All of this, in my opinion, is actually for sale. And perhaps these fairs were like real estate's tours. Now I've discussed how the fairs may have been indoctrination schools, and we have proof of that, even with the notebook that I have sitting here right next to me, proving that the World's Fair was a type of school. But I think it had many different applications. But the only thing I want to emphasize in this segment is that this was not a fair. These are not meant to be amusements. And the fact that most of it is gone is proof of that. But as I look at it here, again, I see industry, and that's what I want to stress. All these towers, all these Eiffel-esque towers were not originally intended for pure beauty or fun, but rather industrial. Now I want to talk about the Tabernacle that I hit pretty hard in my last 2 videos. But first, a quick moment of nature. Okay, nature is like medicine when you live in a world like ours. And recently I showed a picture of the Tabernacle, an old photo, where it was like 5 or 6 stories tall, totally exposed. And we know very well by now, there's at least 4 floors going under the temple and this tabernacle. We've seen pictures of recent excavation of the temple to prove this. They've been renovating it for like 5 years now. And we have old pictures in the 60s where they renovated and showed the blockage going down at least 40 or 50 feet. Again, we couple it with a picture of the tabernacle going down. And I'm not looking at it now, but I've showed an old photo in the past where this tabernacle building says airport on the top. It has a big arrow. And this is a temple. We could lump this into cathedral. any place of worship, I think these had another purpose, especially with their organs. Inside this domed building, we can find this giant organ. And this organ has been here since day one. I mean, you can see old pictures of this organ looking just as it does today. And again, we saw airport on top of this thing in an old photo. And I want to bring this back to the Philly Gasworks building. Philly Gasworks looks like a temple or cathedral, and yet it's one of the few that we're told are a building producing gas. And how about the airships? The airships of the past will have required gas. And often these are confused with just big balloons. But in the past they had steel cages, restaurants, hotels, absolute luxury. And this technology is clearly something of the past that we have lost. I've often discussed how these World's Fair buildings are large enough to house such vessels of travel. You would have needed giant hangars to park these things. You would have needed big towers on top of buildings to refuel them. And I think this is a big part of our history and cover-up. These could not exist. Today we would have airships the size of recreational vehicles, and they couldn't have that. We would discover too much. They need us on the ground. So next, I'm going to talk about Cortez and Montezuma. I just got this comment in my last video, and someone was saying, look at the old depictions of Cortez meeting Montezuma and all the cities. And yes, here we see beautiful cities. We see what today is Moorish flares. And I think this paints a different picture of the Americas. Here we go. For example, the first meeting between Montezuma and Cortez in the city of Mexico. There we go. So they're dressed primitive, but they have an absolutely beautiful, impeccable city. They're occupying the buildings. We can see them up here. Here we go, all the onlookers. We have armies, and no doubt the survivors of a reset now occupying what was quite possibly their town. But now they don't have the ability to build like this, but they're still occupying it. And soon they will lose it to these newcomers. And these newcomers will take credit for all these buildings. Again, this will be the architecture attributed to the colonialists. When we can see it's all here, there's no time to build this. And we can see that the natives are occupying the buildings. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. I would avoid eating pork, probably a lot of reasons, going back to the warnings were given by Moses. But in recent times, actually since 2018, they have been using in livestock, especially the pig. And only very recently are they proposing the rest of the farmed animals. I've mentioned before that pork makes me feel strange, not good. Although I do enjoy a slice of bacon from time to time, I think I'll completely avoid it now. There's actually a lot of information on this. You can read up on it if you want. But yeah, they'll no longer need to poke you to alter your genetic makeup. And I think I'm out of time, but let's do one more segment. I was looking at this Piazza Venezia in Rome. It seems like every few months I do. And I was zoomed in real close to some of these statues. And immediately I thought of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, I thought to myself, these are all the same statues, the same goddesses and gods, and the same hand, the same builders, of course. And so I came back to the Statue of Liberty, and I read the story, how it was assembled and built in pieces, shipped over in crates, and I thought, no way was this shipped in a crate. We're told they built the arm first, and the head, and it was shipped around at different World's Fairs, put on display. Just a gift from France. Kind France, in a very early time period, decides to give a gift. There we go. And why this BS story? Because again, like I said, it has all the elements of what we see anywhere else in the world. It's out of place, it doesn't make sense, and they need to blame it on France. Oh, France gave us this. Oh, okay. And the deal was that we would have to build a pedestal, and they would donate the statue. And just all of this is stupid. The statue is older, pedestal is much older, the star fort that it sits on, even the Statue of Freedom that sits atop the Capitol building in Washington is depicting this past civilization, if you ask me. So that's it. What a stupid video. I do hope you've enjoyed. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you next week.